Well, we made it to 2021, and I'm so glad that everything will be different now. Okay, not everything is different. Okay, nothing actually changed on January 1st. And since hardly any of us use paper calendars anymore, we don't even get the satisfaction of switching those out. Still, there's hopefully some sense of opportunity that comes with the new year. Many people mark the hope of the new year by making resolutions. If you're like me, you've probably made resolutions in years past that you don't remember by summer, much less the remaining 6 months of the year. Instead of making a commitment for the next 365 days, what about making a commitment for a month? None of my previous resolutions bore fruit because a year-long commitment was really biting off more than I could chew. But I can get a lot done in 1 month. And a 1-month commitment can be a great way to explore different ways of living. Or 1 month can be a foundation for longer-term serious change. So I invite you to give it a whirl. Who cares if we missed January 1? Make your commitment run through February 2nd. That's Groundhog Day. Give it a whirl. As my grandmother told me the night before I headed off to the Peace Corps for 2 years, she said, give it a whirl. If you don't like it, you can always come home. Give it a whirl. If the commitment to a different action doesn't begin to create the type of change you hope to see after 30 days, then stop. If it makes you miserable after 30 days, then for Pete's sake, stop. But give it a month to assess if it's something for you. Changing our behavior is strangely incredibly difficult. And behavior includes all sorts of stuff. Our fitness level, including diet and exercise. Behavior is mastering a new skill, changing an interpersonal habit or a financial habit. Housekeeping is a behavioral pattern. And most of parenting or work performance is behavioral patterns. All of these are habits, really. Yes, there's some small amount of new information that may be needed to learn, but the vast majority of these activities are ingrained because we do them over and over and over again. It takes about a month of doing something differently for a different behavior to feel normal. I know a month can feel like a long time, but I didn't make the rules for these wacky brains of ours. That's just the number. In some ways, this is my New Year's sermon, but it grows mostly out of our worship theme for the month, Consolation and Desolation, like Dave was talking about earlier. It's an odd topic, but that's why we have these monthly topics to push us, well, I guess to push me outside of my usual ideas. In religious terms, desolation is an emptiness or despair that we sometimes feel in life. It can be a lack of hope or purpose. Desolation can come from two very different sources. Sometimes desolation enters our life through moments of crisis and profound loss. That's not so surprising. I'm sure people listening have had some sort of personal spiritual setback like that at one time or another. But desolation can also come into our lives through a sense of boredom, drowning in the banality of life. We can lose our sense of purpose when it feels like all we're doing is counting days. I'm not going to go too deeply into the topic of desolation today. We've seen so much of it in 2020. It doesn't need any more time or attention to identify what that sense is. And our theme for the month, desolation, is paired with consolation. Consolation is a sense of meaning, purpose, and joy in life that sustains us through difficult times. Consolation is a little bit more than an emotional band-aid. Don't get me wrong, band-aids are really good. Homemade chicken soup, a warm blanket, a hug, or kind word, all are wonderful to receive from another person. When we're struggling, some comfort and distraction helps us loosen our grip on pain and fear. Those gifts often come to us from other people, from the outside world. Consolation, like healing, comes from the inside. There are external factors that help heal our body and mend our hearts, but at the end of the day, it's an internal process. Consolation is a broadened sense of perspective in which we can make sense of or bear the difficulties of life and still find hope despite the challenges. For many people, spirituality is synonymous with that sense of larger perspective and anchoring in times of challenge. Several of my research rabbit trails on the topic of consolation led to Ignatian spirituality. I had heard the phrase before, but had no idea what it meant. Ignatian spirituality, named after Saint Ignatius, is the center spiritual life for the Jesuit order in Catholicism. It involves a daily inventory of where you have paid attention to God and where you might have missed an opportunity. It's called the daily Examen. And I know that the God-focused language doesn't resonate with a lot of us, but hear me out for a minute. This daily reflection is based on the premise that God or the sacred is present everywhere and all the time. We don't put it quite that way as Unitarian Universalists. We talk about the inherent worth and dignity of every person, the interdependent web of all existence. We talk about nurturing our spirituality. Those beliefs point to a sense of constancy or consistency of the sacred. Even if it appears that the sacred is playing whack-a-mole, popping up over here and disappearing only to pop up over there, our task is to remember that all of life is in the presence of the sacred. Our task is to remember that all of life is in the presence of the sacred. It reminds me of a very famous story from the Hindu text, the Bhagavad Gita. To explain the presence of the sacred, a father is teaching his son. He says, "Place this salt in this pan of water and come to me tomorrow morning." And the son did what he was told, and in the morning his father said to him, "Now bring me the salt that you put into the water last night." The son looks into the water but couldn't find it. Of course, it's dissolved. And his father then says, "Taste the water from this side, and how is it?" "Well, it's salty," says the son. "And taste it from the other side, how is it?" "It's salty." "And in the middle, how is it there?" "It's salty." So the father said, "Look for the salt again and come back tomorrow and we'll talk more." The following day, the son said, "I can't see the salt. I only see water." His father then said, "In the same way, my son, you cannot see the Spirit, but in truth it is there. An invisible and subtle essence is the spirit of the whole universe. That is reality. That is truth. That is also you. But I digress. I was talking about Ignatian spirituality and the daily examen, the daily practice of reflecting on where one finds the sacred showing up in our lives and where we might have missed out on the presence of the sacred. The daily examen is basically a time to sit down, usually at the end of the day, and examine our relationship with God or with the sacred through the course of that day. To do this well, you have to take a kind of objective approach. This isn't about feeling horribly guilty or about feeling like a saint for how in tune you are. The goal of the exercise is to take an honest look at our day. And there are lots of different versions of this I found online, but it seems to be four key components. First is just to center yourself, become aware of the sacred in the present moment, maybe light a candle, take a few deep breaths, slow down. Second, review the day and reflect on when and where you were aware of the sacred. Was it in a place, a feeling in yourself, maybe in some art or nature or someone else? Where did you see it? The third question, where did you forget the presence of the sacred? Maybe most importantly, who did you come across that you forgot possessed inherent worth and dignity? Remember, this is objective. It's not about judging yourself. And then the fourth piece, what might you do tomorrow or going forward to enhance your awareness of the sacred? Some people use those four questions to meditate or to think or to pray. Others suggest committing the process to paper. Writing what we're thinking does the wonderful task of slowing us down and committing to a particular idea. When we take the words out of our heads and put them in text, they're no longer slippery, vague notions of truthiness. Writing them down is a way of committing to them, not forever, but at least for the moment. It's not something to share with the world, but putting them down in black and white somehow brings our thoughts to life and makes them real, even if just to us. If slowing down and making our ideas real is the goal, it only seems reasonable to use actual pen and paper. I know it's a radical idea, but paper and pen are still really useful when we're writing as a tool for thinking more deeply. I really like this idea of the daily examen, the daily inventory of encountering the sacred. I like how simple it is. I like that it fits with a whole wide range of understandings of the sacred. I also like the repetition, the daily repetition. I know repetition rubs some people the wrong way. People often ask, why do we repeat that piece of the order of service every single Sunday? It's simple. It's because we want those words to be ingrained in your consciousness. Repeating the same words or returning to the same act over and over can provide a sense of anchoring. When things are tough, we can go on autopilot. The idea of autopilot might seem mindless or easy or even irresponsible, but when you're going through some stuff, when life doesn't make sense and you can't tell up from down, it's nice to have some ideas or practices that you don't have to struggle to come up with. They're just there and ready to go. Repeating actions over a period of time can also give us a point of comparison. I recently bought a new scale. This wasn't for New Year's. I recently bought a new scale that syncs up with my phone. Now, weighing myself randomly one day doesn't give me much useful information. But if I do it regularly, over the course of time, I can see changes. Similarly, revisiting a similar topic in our journal regularly allows us to see changes and patterns over time. Spiritual practices aren't something to make you feel better about yourself or something to be able to post on social media to show the world how totally amazing and spiritually connected you are. Spiritual practices are habits that we nurture. They help broaden our perspective and deepen our sense of connection and purpose, so that when desolation comes knocking at the door, as it inevitably will, we are prepared. If you're willing, I want to invite you to try something small for a month. It may be 5 minutes of sitting quietly. It may be a daily walk focusing on nature. It may be the daily examen. There are a lot of options. I actually created a slide that lists a bunch of them that you can see. I have to admit, I was pretty inspired by the idea of the daily examen. So for me, for the next 30 days, I'm going to try doing some journaling of my own based on the book, The Four Agreements. Oh, I almost forgot. I have a really easy option for you to try for 30 days. Before you get out of bed in the morning, identify 3 things that you're grateful for. It hardly takes any time, and you can be of any theological persuasion for that to work. Try it for 30 days. Before you get out of bed, think of 3 specific things that you're grateful for. I promise it makes the morning much more pleasant. I hope you will try something. It's okay if you don't, of course, but if you do take on some 30-day spiritual practice challenge, I also want to hear about it. I'm so glad that we have entered the new year. There are still some bumpy months to come, though. So why not dive in together and prepare our hearts and our spirits for the journey ahead?
We now extinguish the flames of our individual chalices, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Leaving this time that we share, take with you some seed of understanding, hope, or courage, and drop it into the confusion of the world. Nourish the seed, that it might grow as a tree of life-giving shelter to the weary and hope to the despairing. Go in peace. Let the light within you be a blessing to the world.